The guy won 70% of his games. It's a really high winning percentage. Boiled down to the big game failures combined with the just precipitous decline this year. If you had told me on the Thursday of Oregon week, we were there for game day, I went to walk through with Stanford Steve, and if you had told me James Franklin was going to be fired in 3 weeks, I would have thought somebody just put something in your drink. Like, it just is. At that moment in time, 3-0, watching that roster fly around the field and walk through that day, I was just, that notion was not even, like, in the conversation. So, yeah, it's a rapid spiral on the field and led to a difficult and very linear decision by Pat Kraft, the athletic director, and others there.
4-21 against the top 10. That's what'll do it. You win 70% of your games. You coach for 11-plus seasons in the Big Ten, but you're 4-21 against top 10 opponents. And that sums up why James Franklin found himself with a pink slip waiting for him on Sunday after Penn State lost for consecutive weeks to teams as a 3-touchdown favorite. Stunning to see what's transpired. Pete Thamel there with the report, I think, said it appropriately. I mean, my first reaction was, can you imagine, remember back 2 weeks ago, when you have a top 10 matchup with Penn State, who's undefeated, ranked number 2 in the country, top 10 Oregon, undefeated, in Happy Valley, whiteout night game, great game, and Oregon had a fourth down, like convert the fourth down or the game ends, and Penn State wins. If Penn State gets that stop, they probably go on the road and blast UCLA, and they're probably still undefeated. But they had a disappointing loss, and then they had to travel 3 time zones to the West Coast and play in front of 9,000 people at the Rose Bowl against a team that was a 3-touchdown underdog and had just fired their coach, and everybody, believed that Penn State was going to roll their helmets out and go win it. But we're continuing to see what is the reality right now in college athletics, especially college football. There is just more parity in this sport. I know people are getting sick of hearing it that way, but it's true. This is what's happening right now in college football. Brian Kelly shared the statistic earlier today. The Southeastern Conference, in SEC games, the average margin of victory right now is 10 points. It had been 17. I mean, you are seeing more competitive games. The bottom of the league has been elevated. Vanderbilt is good. Mississippi State is good. Look around, like, the bottom of the league has been elevated. Now, what you don't have is the superpowers. You don't have Saban's Bama. Kirby's Georgia has obviously taken a step back. It's true all over college football. You had 7 ranked teams lose on Saturday. 7. And so we're not going to see a dominant team, but what you can't do if you're James Franklin is lose as a 3-touchdown favorite. I was floored that they fired him, not because they fired him, but when they fired him. The fact that they fired him amid this 3-game losing streak after 11-plus seasons, it was very reminiscent of what happened to Les Miles. Les had won a championship, played for another, won 2 SEC titles, played for a third, had won nearly 80% of his games, but you had an AD that was ready to fire him, was waiting for an excuse to fire him, and they lost 2 games in September in 2016, and Joe Oliva ran him out the door. And it's a similar situation here with Penn State and James Franklin. Maybe by the end of the season, they would have found a way to move on anyway. The other part of the timing that's interesting is the buyout. If Franklin, coming into the season, had $56 million left on his contract, and his contract runs through 2031. So he is going to be paid the balance of that. Now, that $56 million has been obviously offset by what they've already paid him this year. So the estimates are that it's somewhere around $50 million. So they're going to pay him $50 million between now and 2031 to buy out the remainder of his contract. And that's alleviated a little bit by the fact that you've got 6 years to do it. So you got 72 months that you're going to pay James Franklin that $50 million. Now, this comes at a time where in revenue share, everyone's added a $20 million line item to their budget. Just for context, in the 23-24 fiscal year, Penn State had $220 million in revenue, $215 million in expenses. I'm not trying to bore you with numbers, but just understand that last fiscal year, 23-24, the last fiscal year where we have numbers for, they operated about a $5 million surplus. If all else stays the same and you add $20 million in rev share, now you're negative $15 million, right? Well, now you're adding this new line item to pay out to buy out James Franklin. I'm sure a lot of it will be booster dollars and how it's all going to pay. But all of this, all of these buckets, regardless of how it's distributed, are still paying for whatever you have to pay for. If it's coaches' salaries or facilities or NIL or rev share, whatever it is, like it's all coming. Like you're all. I shouldn't say it's all coming from the same place, but it's all going toward the same thing, regardless of where the funds come in. Now you have this giant expense on top of now having to go pay a new coach. That part of it is a little surprising. Everyone has seen the list of potential candidates already, and everybody's starting with Matt Rhule. As a matter of fact, over at LouisianaSports.net, we have there's a sports betting section at LouisianaSports.net where we always put odds and different stuff like that up. If you're interested, there's a piece up, odds of who will be Penn State's next head coach. And Matt Rhule is the betting favorite at 3-1. Matt Rhule was asked today, the Nebraska head coach was asked today, and he didn't deny it. Matt Rhule is the very obvious name because he played at Penn State, and it's an opportunity to go back to his alma mater. Interestingly enough, Bill O'Brien has the second highest odds. Remember, Bill O'Brien was the coach there successfully before he then went to the NFL to become the Houston Texans head coach. Curt Cignetti of Indiana is next, followed by Lane Kiffin at 8-1, Manny Diaz, and then some further down the line, Urban Meyer, Joe Brady, Will Stein, Brent Key. There have been a lot of people who have asked about Brian Kelly. Kelly's on the list here at 50-1. I think some reporter or some columnist over at SI or something put Kelly's name on a list. I'll tell you this. I think if you're wondering about Brian Kelly, Penn State, I think there's a better chance that if Brian Kelly leaves LSU, he retires and goes and does TV like Nick Saban. I'm not, by the way, I'm not predicting that. I'm not telling you Brian Kelly's leaving to go do TV. What I'm telling you is when he left Notre Dame, where he could have stayed for the rest of his career, he came to Baton Rouge, understanding there was going to be a transition period, but he knew he'd have the resources to win a national championship. It doesn't stand to reason that at 63 years old, Brian Kelly's looking to start over again in a new place. He has tried to lay the foundation here in Baton Rouge to build a championship program and get check the one box that has evaded him in his career, which is the national championship. He's won 300 games. He's won everywhere he's been. The one thing he hasn't done, he's been to the 14 playoff, the 12-team playoff, the BCS national championship game. He just hasn't won the final game and lifted a championship trophy. It's why he's here. I don't think he's leaving here to go do that somewhere else, and not at 63. If Brian Kelly were to leave, I think it would be more likely that he would leave to go do TV. I mean, he gave the answer a few weeks back when he was asked about having a general manager and having to manage all that stuff and salary, rev share, but salaries and so to speak. He said that's why he never went to the NFL. He didn't want to do that. I think he's been willing to tolerate it because he's trying to win a national championship, but I don't think that's how he wants to build a program. So all that to say, I don't think Brian Kelly is leaving for Penn State. I don't know that Penn State's even interested in Brian Kelly. Sometimes the most obvious answer is obvious for a reason. And that's why Matt Rhule is at the top of this list. He took two of the worst jobs in the history of college football in Temple and Baylor and made them winners. He went to the NFL, didn't go great. Now he's back at Penn State, and he's gone from 5 wins to 7 wins, and now he's already at 5-1 right now and trending toward a better year 3. So Matt Rhule would make a lot of sense at Penn State. Curt Cignetti would be fascinating because what he's proved at Indiana is what he did at JMU. James Madison was no fluke. The fact that he got Indiana into the playoff a year ago, I rolled my eyes because he did it without a quality win. But going to Oregon and winning by double digits this week proves, this is more than just a good story and a fluke from a year ago. He's actually building culture and knows how to build a program. And I think with the resources at Penn State, you have a much higher ceiling. You have a championship ceiling at Penn State because of the resources, which you don't have in Bloomington, Indiana. Cignetti would make a lot of sense. Some of the names further down the list, like Lane Kiffin's on there, for example. I absolutely believe Lane Kiffin would have left Ole Miss in 2022 when he wanted to be interviewed for LSU in Florida and neither gave him a sniff. At this point in his career, I'm not so sure he would leave. He would have to decide, is there a greater championship opportunity at Penn State than there is in Oxford, Mississippi? And the answer might be yes. You could navigate the Big Ten schedule far easier than you can the SEC, especially when you have the resources you do at Penn State that you don't have at Ole Miss. You know, the two Mississippi schools, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, are the lowest financial investment schools in the SEC. So when you have the lowest revenue, it's hard to compete in the toughest league. And he's done an amazing job making Ole Miss relevant to a degree they haven't been since literally the 1950s and 60s. But is Penn State the job for which he would leave? I don't know. I'll just keep going back to the fact that sometimes the most obvious answer is the most obvious answer for a reason. The most obvious answer is Matt Rhule, and I think that's probably who's ultimately going to get the Penn State job. But there's a lot of big-time jobs that are open. Penn State is certainly at the top of the list. And then you could look at Virginia Tech and UCLA. Oregon State came open after this weekend as well. I mean, there are some interesting jobs and potentially more, A-list jobs. Like Florida could come open by the end of this season. Arkansas is open. This will be a fascinating cycle as the musical chairs in the coaching carousel start to move. But teams are making those decisions now, taking on heavy buyouts. And the advantage of getting ahead of this, of the hiring cycle, is you don't have to move covertly. Your athletic director can openly talk to agents and representatives of coaches to gauge interest of coaches who might want your job. And so you get a head start on all the coaches or all the programs that are going to wait till November or December to fire their coaches, at which point you're right up upon the December signing period and then the January transfer portal period, where you'd have a condensed window to build your roster for next year with no spring portal window. So I would argue that firing coaches early has never been more meaningful than it is this year because of those things we just discussed, including the fact that your roster is going to be done for all intents and purposes by the time that January portal window closes. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.